Two hot teams and one hot ticket are heating up sports in Oklahoma this week. Hello, I'm sports editor Mike Sherman, and welcome to the latest live version of the Press Row on NewsOK.com. Joining me today at the Dodge Sports Desk are columnist Jenny Carlson, who will tell us whether she thinks the Oklahoma City Thunder could sell out the whole season. Columnist John Rohde, who's looking ahead to the possibility of a 5-0 start for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and Deputy Sports Editor Mike Kaler, who sees shades of 2003 in the 2008 Oklahoma Sooners. Mike, let's start with the Sooners. Barry Trammell's got a story coming up in Saturday's editions of the Oklahoman that's going to really look at the similarities between the 03 Sooners, who were on the verge of a legendary achievement, and the 2008 Sooners, who are on the verge of maybe a high finish.
Well, we had Jason White in the studio yesterday, and we were talking to him about the similarities between 03 and 08. An Okie quarterback taking the snaps for the ball, really a proven passer. Jason used that year to go and win the Heisman Trophy. And like you said, the week of the Big 12 championship game in 2003, before they played K-State, we said, win this game and you're the greatest team in Sooner history. So, not to be outdone with the hyperbole, we'll say I think that this year's team, if you just look at roster to roster, this year's team is better at a lot of positions. Some it falls short, linebacker and such, but depth at wide receiver, running back, there's a lot of positions where 08's better.
John, you buying it?
I'm not falling for it this time. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker in 2003. I was beating that tom-tom as loud as anybody. I thought that team was unbeatable, untouchable, their margin of victory, everything. I think that defense is far superior to this defense overall. But I'm not falling for it this time. I think the schedule sets up for an unbeaten season till they lose to Missouri in the title game. But I'm not falling for it.
Well, here's some of the similarities. You look at the Alabama game. You guys went down there for that. That was sort of that was a faded power in Alabama, but a really intriguing road matchup. Washington sort of has some of those same feels. Probably not even as good as Alabama was, though, but an interesting big game on the road. Jason White, when he came in here the other day, he saw a picture of himself right there, and then there was another picture of Sam Bradford. And I said, does that throwing motion look like Sam's at all? And he said, I never thought about it, but it sort of does. They throw the long ball, both of them. They hit receivers right on stride. Jenny, is it eerie to you at all, or do you see?
There are definitely some similarities. I think Mike hit on the fact that the defense isn't quite the same. And I mean, that OU defense in 2003 had Derek Strait, had Teddy Lehman, had Dan Cody. I mean, this was a defense that was stacked with talent. I'm not saying that this OU defense in 2008 isn't a good defense, but I think they still have to show themselves capable to play to that level. Interior defensive line, I mean, you had Tommy Harris then, you have Gerald McCoy now. Yeah. That's a nice comparison right there. I think what they can do on the interior of that defensive line with some very seemingly capable defensive ends is good, but they still have some unprovenness on that defense. Now, offensively, they're playing at a faster clip than they did in 2003. They're going to be scoring more points. I think their weaponry offensively is more diverse and deeper now than it was in 2003.
Yeah, I mean, somebody already mentioned the other day that OU has got enough more plays than anybody else in the Big 12. And then you look at the depth on the offense, and Sam really has 6 legitimate guys that he can pass to that are decent, really good caliber players at every position. Mm-hmm. I agree with you about up front that it's really comparable. One year you have Dan Cody, the other year you have Austin English, you have Tommy compared to Gerald McCoy. It's when you go back and you get to these the no-name linebackers that they got now, and then the corners that are still kind of iffy.
But this defense may not have to be as good as that defense. Now, does that doesn't help the argument of is this team potentially better than 2003 team? Because I don't think they probably will be, but this team margin of victory may be better than that 2003 team, because I think that offense is going to be able to score and score a lot. And so this defense may not have to be as good as that 2003 defense was.
Well, as good as the defense was in 03, I think the offense is actually better on this team. Look at those running backs, John. Kewan Jones, a really good player, but never became a great player. Ronaldo works a workman-like approach to it. Mark Clayton, in some ways, might be better than anybody on either of those two teams right now. And then Jason White, the guy won the Heisman. I don't think Sam's going to do it. But if you look at overall tools on offense, which team do you take?
I'll take this year's team. They may be as successful. The scores are going to be a lot different And their last 2 games, they scored 21 points combined, that offense. 7 against K-State, 14 against LSU.
Well, speaking of teams off to a great start, John, you've seen the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They're 2-0, soon to be 3-0. Then there's an open week. They play Troy. Everybody's looking ahead to the Missouri game. Will they go into the Missouri game 5-0?
They better. I mean, they have the offensive skill to do it, offensive talent. You talk about offenses, holy smoke. But I'll tell you what, when they go to Missouri, they may give up 80. And that's the concern of everybody that left that stadium on Saturday night. I didn't buy what Mike Gundy said about this keep it in front of you, bend it, don't break. That defense can be snapped in two if it plays a good defense, a good offense. I think there are a lot of questions out there.
Plus, is there any offense better than Missouri right now?
I don't know. OSU's is dynamite, and OU's is good, but I'll tell you what, Des Bryant's the best player in the Big 12.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, then what's the line going to be when OSU and A&M get together? I mean, is that going to be a double? I mean, think about this.
They could be
Oklahoma
favored by
State,
double digits,
a
yeah.
2-touchdown favorite against A&M?
Sure.
It seems wild, but I think it will be. I mean, A&M's going to have to do something between now and that game to prove themselves, worthy of a spread that's smaller than that, in my mind. I think, I'm like you, John. I think that Missouri game could be, it could just be a track meet. But Oklahoma State may take a really big victory at home against A&M as momentum into that game. I don't think Missouri's slowing down any before then, but if they beat Troy and then come back and have a big, solid win against A&M, because remember a few years ago, they went into a home game against A&M and everybody thought, okay, they're going to turn a corner here. And they just got throttled that day in Stillwater. If they can turn those fortunes around, beat A&M solidly at home, go to Columbia feeling good about where they are, who knows? I mean, I think that's a game that Missouri might be potentially overlooking a little bit, and maybe that plays well into the Cowboys' hands. It's going to be really interesting to see how that sets up for them.
I think the gap is still there. I think the gap is still there, definitely with them in Missouri. I think they've gotten to the point where, unlike the last couple of years, of where we can assume victory against Troy and assume victory against A&M. But what the real test is going to be after the Missouri game, not leading up to the Missouri game, because we've been through kind of this pattern with OSU before, where they have a great start and then it just falls off a cliff, and the schedule is set up where that could happen again this year, where they Missouri and then Texas and OU, and where they could be 5-0 and then they could be 6-6 by the time the year's up.
John, taking it back to some of the, measuring sticks we've set up for OSU in the past, it's can they climb up in the Big 12 South? It seems clear to all of us now that they're going to move ahead of A&M, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one major accomplishment. The fact that they're going to have a huge, huge game at Missouri is another one. I just think that Oklahoma State, even though maybe the crowd wasn't maybe all that they hoped it could be last week, things are really moving ahead for him. Like you said, to have a Des Bryant, who could be the best player in the Big 12 conference this year, it just seems like this season has a chance to be a special one.
You got to remember, they're not leaving town for a month, and they don't play anybody when they're here. I mean, Troy, that's curious, and A&M's curious, and open date in Missouri State is a push there. Your alma mater. Good Lord. But they don't even. And then they go to Missouri, which is already sold out. They're selling tickets on the Hill. That place will be nuts. It'll be hostile. But that bubble could burst. Like you said, how bad will that bubble burst if they go to Missouri and get cranked?
I don't think it's any shame to lose to a top 5 team.
No shame at all, but how you do it matters.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
what you do after.
If you recover, if you've lost and you have to recover, how do you recover? I think that becomes important for them.
On to the next topic. Jenny, you and I both made it down to the Ford Center this week to get tickets for the Thunder.
How could you afford them?
Well, low and shared with a lot of people. I've got more people
on each other's laps.
We're sitting on each other's laps during the draft. It's going to be a contentious draft when we draft tickets. But it looks like with about 3,000 tickets available for season tickets as of last night, they might be able to sell out the season ticket allotment. That puts them in the company of some pretty big NBA franchises. The Celtics, the Lakers, the Suns. Is that a surprise to you?
Not really. I guess initially you think, okay, what is this going to be like? But I think I've shelved the surprise when it comes to tickets in the NBA in Oklahoma City. I mean, when the Hornets first came here, we were surprised by that. I think it's time to stop being surprised by the amount of support and the amount of financing that people can put behind these tickets. I mean, Mike Baldwin, who I think has lived down at the Ford Center covering the seat thing for us, he's writing about people who are writing checks for $52,000 for seats. And I'm thinking, okay, so that recession thing, not apparently bothering anybody here with their entertainment dollars. When you talk about the context of LA, Boston, and Phoenix as the other three teams that you're now in concert with when it comes to NBA and Oklahoma City, that's a little bit surprising. But the amount of support, I'm not really surprised by it anymore.
The surprising thing is the rich are complaining. The rich people can't afford it. I know plenty of people have emailed me and said, I got a suite, I got 15 seats, that's $3,600 a game. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to pull the trigger.
So basically, those suites that you're talking about?
Are about the suites?
Those aren't spoken for yet. Those are still for sale.
I get confused on the whole ticket thing because these are people who have suites now, so I guess they can go to Mellencamp and everybody.
Right.
But now they got to commit to the Thunder or they lose those seats. I'm not sure how it works. It doesn't pertain to me, but it pertains to those who have been supportive financially. And it's not going as smoothly as I think it could have.
It's a long way off for me, by the way.
Yeah, well, I don't run in the same social circles that obviously that John does. But one thing we were just kind of talking about in conversation this week is just the economy and the recession-proof Oklahoma City, and what this kind of speaks to, how good the town is doing is. A lot of times we talk about Aubrey McClendon. He makes whatever $1 billion a year. But we kind of forget that there's a whole big chunk of people who work in that field over at Chesapeake and in the other fields who are making a pretty good living and who are, pitching in on it, who haven't had an outlet like this before. I mean, you can go see a Red Hawks game, I guess, but
they're buying tickets in Section 327 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you've got people from all over town who have a nice little kitty built up where they can go in on something like that, or go in with a bunch of friends like this, like Sherm and his commune that he's got going on, and be able to afford good seats.
I think I might just have lost a few of the members of when you called it a commune, they just jumped out. As soon as I turn my phone back on, I'm going to get some text messages about that. But John, you were talking about the people who sort of felt at the top who felt priced out. I think there's a lot of people, it seems to me, that just the common folks are loving what Clay said and what Clay did, which he said, he didn't quite say we're going to soak the rich, but he said we're really going to make those prime seats pay for the seats that we're going to be able to sell to people at good values. There was a lady right in front of me. She was a nurse at one of the local hospitals. Her and her husband go to the games. She was thrilled that she could get $25 seats. They were big Hornets fans. That's who was in line when I was waiting for tickets. Those kind of people. People like me, Don Mecoy, who were sharing tickets for the big group. I mean, I think, and what that does for an NBA team is that broadens their fan base. Right. I mean, that's a lot of people who are going to go to 10 games instead of 42. The other thing about that is by sharing tickets like that, you get better seats than you would if you waited for the 8-game plan. It's just going to be, as you said, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes down, the satisfaction of everybody. The Hornets were an impulse buy. They came, 3 weeks or 6 weeks or something crazy. They sold 12,000 tickets in one night, I'm told, at the Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club. They had all the wealthy folks in Oklahoma City in. George Shinn made their one pitch. They got their checkbooks, 12,000 season tickets. With this buy, it's been a lot more time to kick tires, think about it. That's a little expensive. People have a lot more time to think about the purchase. It's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes down. By the way, let's go on the hot topics for this week, though, and that's we've written about it. I think you've written about it. You've written about it. If I had a comma, I'd write about it. It's the excessive celebration call against Washington that happened last Saturday, cost them the game against BYU. Here's a question for you. Are refs taking all the fun out of now college football?
Well, I think they are. One of the most insightful things I heard this week about the Washington deal, Jake Locker throwing the ball down, getting the flag, and them not being able to make the PAT, was that if there hadn't been a flag on that play, the BYU coach would have just said, all right, let's send the PAT team out there. I mean, he wouldn't have been mad. There's nobody's looked at that and thought that's outrageous. And so that's what, to me, what separates a questionable call like the Locker deal was, and some dude doing 20 push-ups in the end zone after he scores a touchdown. So if it's not going to upset the other coach, then I think that's the spirit of the rule, is that you're offending the other team, that you're making them look bad. There's no way that Locker deal did
Well,
that.
and that to me, it speaks to, I wrote this morning about this whole thing, and, didn't pass the smell test for me, which is essentially what I think you're sort of talking about. Because there were some people that said, well, if they don't throw the flag, then the other team's going to be upset. Really?
Yeah.
Would they really have been upset? In retrospect, maybe somebody from BYU would have seen that and been like, that's a penalty. But nobody's going to storm off the sideline and chunk down their headset and say, where's the flag on that? I agree. I think it was going to go right to the PAT and nobody would have said anything.
The purpose of this rule is Ocho Cinco and
Yeah.
Terrell Owens and Billy White Shoes Johnson and those kind of things, the showboaters, not Jake Locker.
Is it to keep,
This rule was not for Jake Locker.
is it to keep people from brawling, like the old Miami,
Yes,
Florida State games?
I mean, I don't like this. I mean, I'm a Barry Sanders fan. Just flick the ball to the ref. I'm a friend for life if you do that. But, here's the thing. I didn't see the play. I was coming back from OSU, and the commentator said, well, then he threw the ball. He threw the ball up. And I go, wow, that's stupid. Why would he throw the ball in the stands? And then I saw the play, and I go, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
I couldn't believe it. So I knew the outcome, and before I had seen what it was, and I still couldn't believe it.
Well, you wrote this week about how good officiating sometimes swallows the whistle.
Oh, yeah.
And you cited the incident in the national championship basketball
How great
game.
was the end of that regulation? That would have been totally screwed up if they had called that technical.
Slamming the ball?
Yeah, it totally would have changed history.
Right.
Literally.
And then moments, sometimes those spikes, you see them kind of reach for their flags, because back even before this excessive celebration rule came, that could have been a flag. A lot of times you don't see that called.
Listen, I'm all for sportsmanship rules that are in there. And really, when I read the rule book and saw everything that was in there really wasn't anything in there that I said, they should take that out. That should be allowed. But there's got to be some judgment that if you were standing on the other sideline, would you have looked at that and gone, man, oh man, that guy just got away with taunting, something unsportsmanlike or excessive. I just don't think in this instance that was the case.
Yeah, Barry Sanders should just have a camp for people where he teaches guys to hand the referee the ball. Charge all these teams $1,000 bringing all their
It'd be amazing
players.
how many kids would not be able to do it.
What are we supposed to do?
No, I can't.
That was such a classy. That was a classy flip too. You know what I mean? It
it hit him in the head. I think it came down and hit him in his own.
It was
head.
cool. There was a cool classiness to that. Hey, a couple questions from our viewers. Round the table, your predictions on the USC-Ohio State game. Jenny, you first.
I like USC in this game. A lot of questions about Ohio State, and really magnified last week, I thought, by that Ohio game that was really a nail-biter, guys. I think USC wins pretty handily in this game.
Well, Ohio State's got them right where they want them. They don't think they can play dead. So they're going to lose but cover the spread.
Mike? Mike?
I think it's USC big. Not having Beanie last week kind of made a difference for Ohio State, but USC is loaded. I don't think they get touched on the way to playing OU in the national title game.
Wow, this has the feel to me for Ohio State of a lot of the BCS Bowl games, or the BCS Bowl games they played in recently. I just think that's a step up in competition that they're not quite ready for, although, as a college football fan, I hope they make it close. I don't think they will. Next question. What will happen to the Thunder tickets if they have a strong season this year?
I think prices are going to go up again. I really do. They did with the Hornets, and so I think there'll be an increase in prices, and then people are going to have to make that decision: are they holding, are they keeping, or are they letting them go? I think people will probably hold.
I think he needs to hit the pause button on this one. I think he's already in the middle of the pack. He's charging middle of the pack prices for the bottom of the pack team.
That's true.
And we're his friends. This isn't Seattle. He needs to hit the pause button on any price hikes.
Mike?
I think people look at it as like an investment. The market is so small and the demand is so high, it almost ends up being a Green Bay Packers situation where Grandma gives you her tickets in the will. So it could be like that. So I say, it's a buy and a hold, as they say on CNBC.
Of those 3,000 seats that are still available, a lot of them are in that club level. It's really not club swank. It's just sort of that second level of seats where they're non-renewable. Next year, They're going to put some different kinds of seats in there so you don't get them back. And see, I think that's what's happening right now. I think people don't want to buy a seat that they can't get again next year. I think a little bit of it is, especially if the team's good, and I mean good like Hornets' first season here good, I think it's a little bit of the frog in the pot. The heat gets turned up, but nobody, as long as they don't turn it up too quick, everybody stays in, everybody sits tight. Next question from our viewers. Hey, if I want to get 4 tickets for the opener, what's my chances of getting into the Thunder games?
Oh, wow.
4 tickets for the opener, John.
How much pull does Kelvin Sampson still have? I don't think he's going to be my
You
show.
can answer that question.
Yeah. Maybe he'll text message a couple of answers to me. But good luck. That's the one to be at. And it's only Milwaukee.
Right.
That's good scheduling. Don't blow it on the Celtics or something.
That's right. They didn't bring the Hornets in the first week.
Bring in the Bucks, baby.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about this is they're going to set aside, I think, somewhere around 1,000 tickets. So what you'll see, I guess, is a line outside the Ford Center. Yeah. People camping out all night outside the Ford Center. Will PJ Carlissimo bring them pizza? That would be intensity outside the Ford Center.
Well, not all of the people in line this week were true blue Americans from War Acres or anything. There was some shady guys in there who bought them all up.
They got in? You're kidding me? Hey,
I think those people are in the business of buying season tickets and then reselling.
What was the limit? 6?
6.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny, I wondered, how many times did your ID get checked? I thought I was getting onto an airplane.
Yeah, I
It was
did.
like, can I see your boarding pass and your ID?
I want to see your time. Where's your email? Where's your ID? Yeah, I was like, are we getting on a plane at the end of this thing?
They were trying to fence those folks out, but interestingly enough, the next morning, Tuesday morning, I went on and I just went on to Google and I typed Thunder tickets. It took me to StubHub, where already there was one, and Craigslist. Somebody for Craigslist from Oklahoma City, which I'm not allowed to say on this show. Another website that sells things like classifieds was advertising 2 tickets. So somebody went Monday and already put up their season tickets.
Wow.
I thought about scalping my time, I'm on the 9th at 11 o'clock. Hey, who wants that?
Yeah.
You better get a fake ID if you're going to do it. That wasn't going to work. By the way, final thoughts. Don't be surprised if. Mike?
Don't be surprised if next week I say that I'm from a different college. I went to Missouri State. I think next week I'm going to be a proud graduate of Texas A&M Kingsville.
Going next to Jenny. Jenny, don't be surprised if.
This was actually something we talked about in our first college football. What was the News OK exclusive stuff we did with our expert college football folks? We talked about Tulsa and East Carolina. Don't be surprised if one of those teams plays in a BCS Bowl this year. I really, really believe. Now, there's still some tough games out there for East Carolina. Tulsa's got a little bit easier schedule, but those 2 teams could play each other, Conference USA Championship game, for a chance to play in a BCS Bowl. I think it'd be awesome.
I'll be surprised if one of them's there.
All right.
Tulsa. I'll be real surprised. Don't be surprised if Leach goes for 100 this week against SMU.
When's that
Because June Jones isn't going to slow down that game.
No.
The game will end.
Somebody's got to score.
I think Ike will hit sometime in the second half next Tuesday, and the game will still be going on. But he'll be going after 100.
That'll be big news. I say don't be surprised if the Philadelphia Eagles go into Texas Stadium on Monday night and stun the Cowboys. I think Donovan McNabb is back. I think we're in for a Donnybrook in the NFC East, one of those old 90s styles. Great.
Donnybrook goes back about 60 years.
Well, I need to think of a 90s word. I think we're in for a great race in the NFC East. Hey, and that's all for the Press Row Live. Be sure to watch a new episode of Bedlam Nation Conversation Friday on News OK TV, and stick with the best coverage team in the state for all your sports news at newsok.com, News OK TV, and every day in the Oklahoman.